Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Greater Manchester mayoral election hustings on the topic of transport. I'm Andrew Fletcher. I'm a journalist and lecturer here at the university, and I'm delighted to host this virtual event tonight. Transport, of course, is a vitally important part of the Greater Manchester mayor's role. The mayor is responsible for a major budget in the most connected city region outside of London, and transport policy touches on our lives in so many ways, whether it's the state of the roads we drive on, the cost of the buses and trams we catch, the cycling routes we ride along, and of course the pavements we walk on. Well, we're going to hear tonight from the candidates on all these topics, and the scope of discussion and debate is very much in your hands as the audience. Shortly, I'll be handing over to the candidates who will be making their opening addresses, and from there we'll have a question and answer session. After around an hour of questions, we will hear from the candidates again for closing statements. Now, we have had some questions submitted in advance, but we also want to take questions on the night. So do please get yours in now and throughout the evening. Via the Q&A box, you should be able to see it on the screen in front of you, so you can hear from the candidates on the issues that matter to you. You can also tweet along tonight using the hashtag GMTransportHustings. That's hashtag GMTransportHustings. But before all that, I'd like to invite Harry Lewington Spencer, who is a researcher here at the University of Salford, to talk about the work she's been doing on active travel in Greater Manchester. Harry is part of the Healthy Active Cities research group at the university. The team has a particular focus on active travel, and Harry's work with Transport for Greater Manchester will feed directly into policy development. Harry's also recently been appointed to the Greater Manchester Walking and Cycling Board. So over to you now, Harry.
Thank you very much. So the university's Healthy Active Cities research group was formed in 2018 to bring together researchers and stakeholders to develop transport research in Greater Manchester and beyond. We focus on sustainable and active travel, and reflecting the interdisciplinary nature of this research, our team is based across the schools of health and society, science and engineering, and environment. For our research and engagement activities, we have established a network of transport, health and sustainability focused individuals and organisations, and have helped shape policy on active travel and sustainable transport, both regionally and nationally. In 2018, we published the first large-scale study of a dockless bike share scheme in the UK, the Mobike Greater Manchester Pilot Scheme. Since then, we have continued to research and comment on micromobility. We've looked at e-cargo bikes, we're looking at e-scooters, low-traffic neighbourhoods, and running. We also run a popular bi-monthly seminar series, Sustainable Transport Futures. Each seminar tackles a different issue relating to transport and attracts participants from across research, practice and policy, both from within the UK and further afield. If you'd like more information on the series or any of our projects, then you can visit our website by Googling Healthy Active Cities, and you can sign up to our mailing list there. So thank you to the mayoral candidates and audience members for attending this evening. I'm looking forward to an evening of challenging and ambitious discussions about the future of transport in our region, and I'm particularly interested in hearing candidates' commitments to inclusion and accessibility within these transport futures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Harry. Great to hear about the fascinating work that you and the team are doing at the university on this agenda. Now, to the main events. All the declared candidates vying for the job of Greater Manchester Mayor were invited to take part in this debate. And tonight, I'm very pleased to say we're joined by 6 of them. Nick Buckley, who is the candidate for Reform UK. Andy Burnham, candidate for the Labour Party. Peter Clifford, who is the candidate for the Communist League. Michael Elston, who's an independent candidate, Melanie Horrocks, candidate for the Green Party, and Simon Lepori, candidate for the Liberal Democrats. Now, the candidates have been invited to speak in alphabetical order by surname. So candidates, please do unmute yourselves before speaking so that we can hear you. You'll have 3 minutes and keep an eye on the clock as I'll be coming in once the time is up. So without further ado, the first opening statement tonight, it's over to Nick Buckley. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invite today. I have 3 points to discuss. Everyone wants better public transport, but how do we achieve it? Who pays for it? How do we increase the quality of the journey so that people actually want to use it? The level of antisocial behaviour connected to public transport is one of the major reasons why some people do not use it. Integrating bus, tram and train services is long overdue. I've been to London, I've used their system, it's good. But at the moment we need competence in Greater Manchester more than good ideas. The likelihood we will make our transport system better is not obvious to me presently. We all know our police service is failing and is in special measures. Cycling is seen as a golden solution, but I feel this is a falsehood in Greater Manchester. I've not cycled for 25 years and I have no intentions of doing so in the future. No one I know cycles to work. Some cycle for pleasure and leisure, and that's great and we need to support that. For the city with the rainfall we have, cycling is not a golden solution. How does a busy modern life allow you to cycle to work, pick up the kids, visit the supermarket, and cover 25 miles in your average hectic day? Even the rent-a-bike scheme a few years ago failed, mainly due to antisocial behaviour. The clean air zone is a new congestion charge in the making. Of course I want clean air, but I do not want to be penalised for using my car. I know it is only targeting commercial vehicles initially, but the temptation of expanding the remit to cover domestic vehicles at a later date is huge. There are many ways to combat polluting vehicles. Change the MOT emission requirements, adapt engines with new technologies, invent, promote cleaner engines, but charging businesses blood money to drive is not the answer. If these vehicles are that dangerous, then get them off the roads and protect us all. I will create a team of experts. I will start real conversations with the public to find out what sort of lives they want to live, not the lies we tell them to live. I will enhance community safety on our public transport, for that is what people want today. We need to be looking forward to cleaner engines, electric vehicles and driverless cars. Driverless taxis will be here before we know it. We need to stop thinking horse and cart solutions and start thinking jetpacks and machines that suck pollutants out the air. The future belongs to our intellect and our creativity. The future of transport will be created in institutions like this one where I'm speaking today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. Now, the next candidate we're going to hear from is Andy Burnham. Andy.
Thanks, Andrew. Good evening, everybody, and thank you to the University of Salford for putting on this hustings. And it's important because transport is the defining issue of this mayoral campaign. It's going to dominate the next mayoral term, whoever wins. It's the single biggest thing that's been holding our city region back, and it's been doing that for the last 35 years since the Tories deregulated buses in Greater Manchester. Fares have soared, routes have been cut, and passenger numbers have halved. And transport overall is a fragmented, confusing, overpriced, unreliable system. And it's not therefore surprising that there are too many cars on the road. So let me say something very clearly tonight. If elected, I will bring buses in Greater Manchester back under public control for the first time in 35 years. And that won't just allow us to make buses more affordable, a better system that works for us, rather than filling the profits up with the private bus companies. It will allow us, it creates the opportunity to build a London-style public transport system in Greater Manchester. By 2025, a single integrated system covering bus and tram. So people here can take as many buses and trams as they want to in any given day and only pay up to the daily cap. That will completely change the way people move around our city region. A single livery, tap in, tap out system. That's what we need, and it's what I have a plan to build. Alongside that, we need to continue to build segregated cycling and walking infrastructure. I set aside funding to build the B network at the start of my mayoral term, and that is a massive investment in our future. We've got to make cycling and walking the first choice for the first mile and the last mile, so that people then can connect with our reformed public transport system and make very different journeys to the ones they do today. And let me now just say something about how we complete this vision of this London-style public transport system. We have lobbied to bring rail services and stations under public control as well, and the government has committed to that. So by the end of the decade, rail services come into, and we can end the scandal that over half of our train stations today are not accessible to many disabled people because they are not wheelchair accessible. That has got to end. So just to conclude, Andrew, the Sunday Times said at the weekend that we are already the most exciting, livable big city in the UK. If we introduce the London-style public transport system, as I've described tonight, it will take Greater Manchester up to the next level and make this amazing place that we all call home an even better place to live. Thank you.
Andy Burnham, thank you very much. Next, we have Peter Clifford. Peter.
Hello and good evening. I'm a rail worker, a train dispatcher at Piccadilly Rail Station. And the centre of my campaign in the last few weeks has been getting support for 400 workers who are on strike at Queen's Road Bus Depot. They face a pay cut, possible job cuts, at the same time a move by their employers to undermine the union and the threat of fire and rehire. Millions of other workers are facing similar situation from their employers. But what's different about Queen's Road is that by striking, they are setting us all an example. I want to raise with all of the candidates, this is a big question, what is going on at Queen's Road for transport workers and for other workers. Do you stand with the strikers? I've been to the picket line. I would urge all those listening to join a rally the strikers are organising this Saturday at 3 o'clock onwards. One of the strikers told me when I was last there how she was unsure about joining the strike to begin with. But she told me now she saw it was worth it, acting together through the union. She saw it's worthwhile overcoming the fear many workers have, the idea that we can do nothing. She saw that we could get stronger if we act as a class. I don't think the employers at Queen's Road are any big exception. All employers, or the whole employing class, is driven to attack us, our jobs and our pay and our conditions to maintain their profit system. The platform I stand for starts with how to advance our class politically in the face of this, what we can fight for through our unions. The fight for jobs, not just against job cuts. The fight for a public works programme to get the transport system and healthcare that we need. Our platform extends support to struggles of working people around the world who face big challenges too, whether it's in Myanmar or revolutionary Cuba facing mounting threats from the US. But everything I raise takes a fight. It will take acting on a far bigger scale than they are right now at Queen's Road. But these strikes are important. They show what workers are capable of. Today, I don't believe, and I don't think many working people believe, that there is a party that speaks and acts for working people. But through struggle, I think we can take steps towards a new party of Labour, a party that can build a movement of millions that can replace the source of our problem, the capitalist profit system. So our platform is not mainly about May the 6th. It's about the course of struggle before and after that. It's about, and that's where change has and will come from. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. Now, can I ask Michael Elston to make your introductory remarks, please? Michael.
In some countries, public transport is a pleasure to use. The stations are nice, They have bakeries, cafes, restaurants, shops, bookshops, newsagents. You could actually spend a day out at some of the stations. For the most part, that's not so much the case in this country. So firstly, I want to improve our stations to make them more accessible, to build new stations where possible in the heart of residential areas, to make them more convenient, which will cut down journey times, to make them safer, to surround them by amenities, to make them a pleasure to use. I'm going to be encouraging a change in the start of the working day from 9 a.m, which it remains for most people, to 3 hours after sunrise, and then 2 further shifts of 6 hours and 9 hours after sunrise. At the moment, we have 2 rush hours, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. So this change will mean that we effectively have 6 hours in which people are making their journeys to and from work. Bearing in mind, we're not over COVID yet, it's likely that we're going to have to be social distancing for quite some time to come. It means that journeys will be taken more evenly throughout the course of the day. And so the rush hours will be less busy. That this change will mean that rush hours are less, roads are less congested, and journey times will be shorter. And thinking about it more broadly, it will mean that we no longer have to heat and light our homes and our businesses during the hours of darkness. And of course, it will also be beneficial to our health. And furthermore, anyone who wants to walk or to cycle to work or to use any other mode of transport, it will be more safe because it will be light. So if I'm elected, all forms of public transport will be adopting the new hours of work, the Greater Manchester working day. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. Now, we're going to hear from Melanie Horrocks for her opening statement. Over to you, Melanie.
Hi, Andrew. Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for having me. I think we need to be absolutely clear here at the start of this whole event is that the stark reality is we are in a climate emergency and there actually is no planet B. Andrew was correct when he opened today about how vitally important it is in the city region. And we are starting to see some moves in the right way. And as I have done on a previous occasion, I thank Andy for his work with regards to the buses, and it's great to see Green Party policy being implemented by a Labour mayor to bring buses under public control. However, we have absolutely got to do more to reduce reliance on private cars. And unlike Nick, I have a lot of friends who commute to work and travel around socially by bike. My entire family gets to work and to school by bike. And we've got to have a look, and we've got to fully overhaul the transport system to bring us not in line with London, but with most European major cities, where we've got a fully integrated transport system in terms of buses, trams and trains, where they actually join up together and you can get the bus to the tram. You can travel across our amazing region just reliant on public transport without getting to a situation where you're suddenly stranded in the middle of nowhere trying to Google your way to where the nearest bus or tram stop is. They need to join up. But they also need to go a step further than that. And as we see across huge swathes of Europe, it is possible to have not just large storage areas for bikes and for other active modes of transport at our interchanges and hubs, but to also allow cycles, not just the very expensive, very exclusionary Brompton type on that you can fold into a very snazzy little bag, but any type of bicycle onto buses, onto trains, onto trams, to enable people to have that option to cycle not just to those routes, but to travel and to cycle off at the other end, and encouraging that active form of transport, be it walking or cycling, has huge benefits for all of us. including just an improvement to the air that we're all breathing. And so that is something that cannot be overlooked. I've also started to discuss the fact that, knowing how popular the Cycle to Work scheme is to how we can look to expand that to create a Cycle to School scheme, supported across the region to enable children to have greater access to bicycles, many of which we know are prohibitively expensive, and to get them off buses, crammed in as we know they are, particularly at the moment. One of the biggest worries for parents is children pushed into school transport, to get them onto bikes, and that system will then allow them to travel across Greater Manchester out into our green spaces and our green areas to actually exercise and to enjoy those spaces. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Now we're going to hear from Simon Lepori. Simon.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. I think on transport, a lot of us tend to agree. We've got a great city region. We've got the tram system, which is great. It's one of those things alongside football, you go around the world and people talk about, football, trams. They know about that. But the problem is it's not integrated. It's not all working together. And as our current mayor has alluded to, we've now got the buses back into public ownership, and we're moving towards that. We're moving towards that single ticket system. And I'm glad that he's said this evening that he's lobbying for train lines and train stations to come into that Greater Manchester transport network. We need a single ticket to get on all of these three things across Greater Manchester. I've been a commuter, I still am. I don't drive. I walk everywhere, I cycle everywhere, or I use public transport. And I'm happy to do that. That's my choice. And it should be encouraged, by the way. When we talk about active travel and neighbourhoods, the 15-minute neighbourhood, it's not a myth. We just have to encourage it and put in place the things that will enable it. So as other candidates alluded to, share bike schemes or bike loan schemes, safer segregated cycleways, safer footpaths that aren't full of cracks and things that can trip you up. We want children to get to school safely. We want them to get home safely. We want them to be active and healthy, because while we have a climate emergency, in Greater Manchester, we've also got a health emergency. We've got disparities across the city region with diabetes, obesity, and isolation. We need to deal with that through public health, through our public transport network, and through our active travel initiatives. So I fully support the 15-minute neighbourhood. I fully support safe and comfortable walking and cycle routes around this city region. I also support getting our bikes onto our trains, our trams, and our buses. I also support the electrification of our bus network. We need to lead the world within the green revolution that we're living through and say, we don't want to pollute our streets. We want a green, safe, and clean public transport network. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Now, all the candidates that have declared were invited to take part in the hustings tonight. We received responses from the 6 that we've heard from already. We did not receive a response from Stephen Morris, the candidate for the English Democrats, and we're getting to the bottom of why we did not receive this. But Stephen is here tonight, and we've invited him onto the panel now in the spirit of flexibility and fairness. So, Stephen, it's now your opportunity to make an opening statement for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Well, I'm the English Democrat candidate for Greater Manchester. Where we're talking about public transport, I spent 15 years working on Manchester trams in various departments, from the revenue department, driving, to special events, working with police operations on antisocial behaviour issues. So I have a very good knowledge of how the tram system works. I'm also a General Secretary of a trade union, and I deal with a lot of issues to do with people in the bus industry, especially in Greater London. And so I know the issues that the bus industry is now going to be looking at as we go forward. So I'm ideally placed to look at how the bus industry and the tram and everything interlinks as one. It's quite nice now that Andy Burnham's finally decided to follow a policy that we've been pushing since the last mayoral election, of having the capped fares and everything. It's quite interesting, but it's took him too long. We need an effective mayor to bring these things in a lot quicker, a lot sooner, rather than dilly-dally all this time. We want to have the capped fares. We've mentioned this quite a lot. We want to abolish the peak fares, because as we move forward to get industry moving in Greater Manchester and go to more of a 24-hour system, we need to abolish the peak fares, and that's what we would do. We also promote greater cycleways and pedestrian-friendly areas. But the other thing is, we're also against any form of congestion charge, any form of zero emission charge. The Greater Manchester had a referendum on a form of charging, and it unanimously rejected it all. And it should not be brought in, especially now, because smaller businesses will be directly affected by that. So whichever way they try and package it, either into a congestion charge, zero emission zone, or whatever, under an English Democrat mayoralty, we wouldn't have that. We would certainly oppose it in every way we can, because Greater Manchester opposed any form of congestion charging. But we're also pro to get people and encourage them into public transport. You need to encourage people into the buses, encourage people to cycle, encourage people to walk. And we do use a phrase of buy local. You know, look at local industries, local shops, try and develop them. We're going to need that more than most now, where the small shops, the small businesses have actually been left out hung and dry by the Conservatives. And the Labour opposition have done virtually nothing to assist them on that, where the big corporations, like the big supermarkets, have been allowed to operate, but the small businesses haven't. So we've got to open up Manchester, and we've got to open up the transport and make it absolutely fit for purpose. But we need an effective mayor, not one that dilly-dallies and takes 4 or 5 years to get things done.
Stephen, thank you very much. And thank you to all the candidates. Thank you for sticking to the 3-minute time limit so well. All of you did that there, so thank you very much indeed. Now, it's time for the question and answer session, and we've had a number of questions submitted in advance of tonight, and we are, of course, taking your questions in the Q&A box. So if you've got a question for the candidates tonight, then pop it into that Q&A box, and we will do our best to ask it to them. Do submit your questions, and the team and I will be going through and pulling them out to put them to the candidates. Now, each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to respond to each question. And for fairness, we're going to put every question to every candidate. Candidates, I'll be inviting you to speak when it's your turn, but please do remember to unmute yourself so that we can hear what you're saying. Now, the first question of the night is a pre-submitted question from Steve Donahue. And Steve asks, what do the candidates propose to do about introducing extra bus priority measures to stop our cities choking up with congestion? What do the candidates propose to do about introducing extra bus priority measures to stop our cities choking up with congestion? So I'm going to put that question, first of all, to Nick Buckley.
Thank you. So first of all, we need to work out what you mean by congestion. So are we talking about the fact we have vehicles on the road, or are we talking about the pollutants that they emit? So on the busy periods of time, when we have lots of buses getting into the city centre, public transport, there will always be some level of congestion because they're the peak times. The pollutant side of it is simple. We just need cleaner vehicles. It's as simple as that. How we stop people going into the city centre on public transport to work, and all the working from home, a lot of it will eventually stop over the next year, and the city centres and the town centres will get busy again, and people will be commuting. That's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, Nick, thank you very much indeed. And next to Andy Burnham, I'll just ask the question again. What do the candidates propose to do about introducing extra bus priority measures to stop our cities choking up with congestion?
Well, thank you for the question, and it's the right question to ask because if we're going to make a reformed bus system deliver everything we want, we've got to make sure it's attractive for the public to use. So the answer to the question is we have been doing that. We have been putting in bus lanes and other priority bus measures all over Greater Manchester. We continue to work with our 10 councils to identify the areas where there are still bottlenecks and where buses can get stuck. And we are committed to putting in those extra measures. Just to answer what was said before about use of the Bus Services Act, the powers to re-regulate, it's not a case of dilly-dallying, because I'm the first mayor in the country to use powers under that act. We were ready to take a decision in 2020, but had to put it on pause because of the pandemic. But we are now bringing forward that plan. This is now a legal document that I've signed, and I think we do need to hear from every candidate in this election. Will they continue with the plan to bring buses back under public control? We have a track record over the last few years of showing what we can do when we prioritise buses on our roads. When I was the Member of Parliament for Lee, we were criticised for championing the Lee guided busway. People said it wouldn't work, it would be a white elephant, nobody would use it. And in many ways, it's a glimpse of what can be achieved if we have buses at that standard running right across our city region. The busway has been an unbelievable success when it comes to the amount of passengers that it's been carrying, around 70,000 journeys per month. It shows what we can do if we prioritise bus, if we put on good standard vehicles with all of the things that passengers expect these days, and with fares that people can afford. So that is the proof that we can do this, because we've done it in the last few years, and we will continue to prioritise buses so that the reform system can work properly across Greater Manchester.
Thank you very much, Andy. And next, the same question to Peter Clifford.
Yeah, I don't agree that a London-style bus system will solve anything fundamentally for working people in this in Greater Manchester. The London-style bus system rests on two things: the franchise system, first of all, where there's a race to the bottom by the bus companies on workers' pay and conditions. That's why there have been 3 strikes in the last month in London. And it rests on another thing. Key to its revenue is the ever-expanding congestion charge, which differentially hits working people harder in London. Public bodies, so-called public bodies under capitalism, in reality are subordinated to the needs of the profit system. That's why I raise what seemingly are little strikes like Queen's Road are tremendously important, because they're about the fight for the unions. And the fight for the unions is the key to the answer to the future of the transport system, which in my view needs to be the fight for workers to control the transport industry in conjunction with the users. It's only through that that we'll begin with the needs of working people, not the profit system, which will continue to attack us.
Thank you very much, Peter. Now, the same question to Michael Elston.
What the question is perhaps alluding... Oh, can you hear me?
Sorry, Michael, carry on.
What the question is perhaps alluding to is the fact that the franchising system actually doesn't make any provision to shorten bus journey times. So yeah, I think there are things that we can do. I'm always in favour of innovation. I'm not necessarily in favour of providing more bus lanes, because they have a detrimental effects on car drivers. But I think we could have a system whereby we could have a bus lane that cars can also use, but maybe can move out of when a bus is there. Because at the moment we have a system where bus lanes remain empty for a lot of the time. I mean, in answer to Andy's question about franchising, well, I'm very much in favour of providing a fully integrating system of public transport. But is this system is this right for Manchester? I mean, the London faces a massive deficit as a result of it. Bus drivers are on strike there too. The cost to the council tax is going to be massive. It makes no provision for a move towards green buses or potentially hydrogen buses. That's going to cost more. It makes no provision for buying depots. That's going to be an extra 84 million or thereabouts. It doesn't guarantee that ticket prices will come down. In fact, if left to the local authorities, they may well increase. There are lots of problems, and there's a lot that it doesn't provide for.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Michael. Next, Melanie, what do you propose to do about introducing extra bus priority measures to stop our cities choking up with congestion?
I think it's a really excellent question, and I think it raises quite a key issue. One thing that those of us who have watched the free public transport trials in Estonia have really noticed is the fact that those sorts of measures are only effective, and increasing public transport options are only effective if there is a disincentive with regards to using private vehicles, and that's where the Estonia trial didn't succeed and didn't have the impact that it was thought it would do. So this is where the freeing up of bus services and bus journeys really is very important. And in a recent meeting I had with an environmental group, they were talking about the scheme that had been introduced in Salford that had very quick transport links straight through and all the way through to Wigan. And it's massively changed the way that commuters in those areas move around the city. So much so that you will have a almost guaranteed arrival time that is going to be quicker than any private car that you can take. And that is how you deal with congestion. You provide a really good, safe, clean, viable alternative that people actively choose. So it is about balancing how you're promoting those services and what you're doing in advance. I think it's really one thing that I'm really being struck from the answers. I'm thinking, we aren't in London. It's all very well to look for London and to get some examples from other cities, but we really have got to have a Manchester and a greater Manchester-based solution, not just try and pick and choose certain bits from London and compare ourselves in that way. And I think it's really important to notice that while green vehicles and cleaner emissions from buses and public transport is key, electric vehicles aren't the answer across the board, because that fails to take into account the huge pollution that comes from tyres still on electric cars. So electric buses are a great solution. Just relying on electric vehicles across the board is poor and not a solution. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you, Melanie. Next, the same question to Simon Lepori. Simon.
Thank you very much. I think we all agree it's an incredibly interesting question. I worked at Central Manchester site with MRI St Mary's when they were creating the bus corridor along Oxford Road. And when they started that, a lot of us were very sceptical about what the outcome was going to be. However, that road from Oxford Road train station down to and past the hospital to Rusholme, it was a pleasure to walk along it after I'd finished work and to walk to work from the train station in the mornings, because it didn't feel as dirty, it didn't feel as smoggy, because there were no cars on the roads, and cars were being fined to go on those roads. They were dedicated to buses and taxis. Do I believe in bus lanes? Yes and no. They have to be put in the right places. So Oxford Road is an example of it done right. They actually had to expand the parallel road and change around some junctions so people could still get in to the city centre by car. But have they moved the pollution problem? Absolutely. I'm with Mel on this. Electric cars aren't going to be the final solution because of the NO2 emissions and the particulates from wheel pollution. And I think there's a paper somewhere about graphene covered tires that don't degrade as quickly. So that's something in our sci-fi future to look forward to. Putting in effective cycle lanes and using bus lanes for cyclists is something that will free up and make us use our space much more efficiently. So if a bus is going down a bus lane and then there's nothing behind it, cyclists can use the bus lane safely. And you could also use, I'm finished my time. Sorry.
Your time is up.
We could go on forever. I do apologize.
Thank you very much for that answer. Okay. And finally, Stephen Morris.
Yeah, we do seriously need to look at the bus lanes. A classic example is one up near me in Bury. congestion coming off the motorway, done away with the bus lane, no congestion, because it was stopping the flow of the traffic. All bus lanes need to be reviewed, see where the bottlenecks are. We need to get the city flowing. Cars do create congestion if they sat idling by, but we need to encourage people to get onto the buses. Going back to what the other Peter said, I was in London last week, the depots around Twickenham, and I know what their issues are. So for me, it would be a standard wage right across the board. All the bus companies would have to look at the standard wage for bus drivers. In London, we don't want a London style. I know we keep mentioning London style. We don't want that because their wages just keep getting undercut, and their hours kept getting extended, and they keep getting passed from pillar to post as they lose the route. You might get a Bellio, Go Ahead, London United, and so on. And just be aware that not all London is on strike, only a couple of depots. But it seems to be that as soon as we mention London's on strike, the whole thing comes to a halt. So we need to look at getting the workers looked after correctly. Make sure they have a standard wage and they're not being passed from pillar to post, that the rotas are dealt with properly. Get the buses moving, look at the bus lanes, get the cars moving, but also encourage people then to move from the car to the bus. And I see how we're moving now from an attack on the petrol and diesel car drivers to saying, well, now we want people out of electric cars. So it just, where people do need cars, buses and cycles will not solve everybody's problem. Not everybody can travel on that. There will be a need for cars. And we have to work with that, not against it. And to me, the argument on suddenly now going this tyre route may be a fair argument, but it's not going to be solved overnight. And we have to look at the immediate aspects, what we can do now.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. Thank you, candidates, and thank you to Steve for that first question, for kicking us off this evening. Now, the second question comes from Jenny via the Q&A box. And don't forget, you can put your questions to the candidates via the Q&A box tonight. And Jenny has done that. She asks, how important is active travel as part of the transport offering in Greater Manchester? How important is active travel as part of the transport offering in Greater Manchester? Well, that question goes first of all to Andy Burnham. Andy.
I think it's critically important because it's the one bit of the transport system that delivers the most returns in terms of cutting congestion, cleaning up the air, making people healthier, improving our communities. It's why when I came in as mayor, we were given a fund, the Transforming Cities Fund. In our case, it was worth £243 million. And just to prove that this isn't just saying what's convenient in a hustings like this, I decided to dedicate 2/3 of that money to building the country's largest segregated cycling and walking network, the B network, because I believe passionately that people's first choice, port of call for the first mile or the last mile should be walking or cycling. And I think people are feeling that more now coming out of the year that we've just had. I think people are out and about more. I think they do want to be able to make active travel more part of their everyday routine. So the idea, the vision is that people would cycle or walk to a bus stop, then they can get on a bus that is under public control. So we decide where it goes rather than what the private companies deciding where it goes. We decide what it charges rather than they decide what it charges. And also people then can get off that bus and onto a tram and it still be ticketed as a single journey. And then they come home and then they can walk or cycle the last mile. That is the vision. And it's a vision for people moving around Greater Manchester very differently indeed. And active travel is baked into it. Yes, people will still want to use their cars, but we need to get a better balance than what we've got now. People are trapped in their cars because the public transport offering in Greater Manchester is nowhere near good enough at the moment. I have got a vision to make it better. It's not about copying London, it's learning from what works down in London. That's at the heart of our plan, and it will make our region so much more livable.
Andrew, please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Apologies, I didn't unmute myself there. Having asked all our candidates to remember that golden rule. Thank you very much indeed, Andy Burnham. Next to answer that question, Peter Clifford. Peter.
Well, I think we can aspire to all kinds of things that can appear on the surface nice, but then you have to balance up against that the real world that people live in and what they're able to do. I work a 12-hour shift. I'm going to leave home around 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I'm going to look for the quickest and the easiest way to get to work. Well, I have a problem. My bosses won't let me have a free car park. So if it's raining, then, you know, I can't cycle in. I have to take the car. That's the choice that I make, and I take a hit on having to pay for the car park. So anyway, part of what I'm getting at is that a lot of working people don't have the choice to have this great flexibility and wouldn't it be nice kind of thing, because we live in a ruthless world. Millions are losing their jobs. We're in the second year of a pay freeze on the railway. London-style buses are not good for, of course, you can get a ticketing system. Of course, you can get a better connectivity, but bus workers are getting hammered. Working people are being hammered through the tax on the congestion charge for something they don't cause and aren't responsible for. So I wouldn't advocate a London-style thing. Rather, I'd advocate a course of struggle by working people to fight for a different kind of world where the choices that people aspire to can really be organised in our interests.
Thank you very much, Peter. Next, same question to Michael Elston. How important is active travel as part of the transport offering in Greater Manchester?
I've certainly been walking a lot more during lockdown. I think many people have been. I want to introduce walkways separate from roads, not just pavements alongside roads, but entirely separate, surrounded by amenities, linking residential areas and residential developments to town centres and linking town and city centres to each other. And on top of that, I mean, actually, I think someone from the University of Salford mentioned e-scooters. I saw a lot of people on scooters last night. I wonder if it was them. Of course, there are other options apart from walking and cycling. And again, I'm in favour of innovation, and alongside walkways, we can have means for other types of transport. Something else is rickshaws, which we don't have here and could potentially do. But yeah, I mean, any of that is not going to be, in terms of commuting, for the majority of people, is not going to be an alternative. So an integrated system of public transport is important. But we hear that term a lot, integrated, and often what's made of it is integrating the various bus operators into one. But also, what the scheme really hasn't made many mention of is integrating the various systems of public transport. At the moment, our buses don't stop outside tram stations. You can get off a bus stop. If you don't know the area, you don't have any idea where the nearest train or tram station is. So that's a part of integration as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yes, we are indeed at the University of Salford part of a pilot scheme to try out the e-scooters. Now, the same question to Melanie Horrocks. How important is active travel as part of the transport offering in Greater Manchester? Melanie?
It's absolutely vital. It's a really key element, and we have to try and look at cultural change around cycling. There was a time when Holland didn't have the levels of cycling it does now, and that was an active decision to improve health and to improve various other health-related matters that come from reducing pollution. In Holland now, you've got something like 37%, I think, of short journeys are taken by bike. In the UK, it is under 3%. That's just not something that we can dismiss by going, oh, it rains a bit in Manchester, or it's just not feasible for some people. It won't always be a feasible option for a lot of people, and that's why we need to have a proper system that works together. but actually a system that enables people to make those active transport travel and to make it pleasant and to make it easy is something that's really very vital to making sure that public transport is accessible and is an attractive option. And that includes making sure that these things are safe. And I do agree, I forget which candidate was talking about the safety of public transport. That's entirely appropriate, particularly when we're looking at women and encouraging them into public transport and to using those systems. And again, that's where cycling is very much a feminist issue. Bicycles liberated women, and bicycles can continue to liberate women, and we must encourage that, and we mustn't overlook it. Active transport also brings another bonus as well, is that when we have active and sensible cycle routes and paths, these often lead to greater accessible areas and spaces for people who have a disability and who aren't just able to access ordinary bikes. I've got friends who use adapted trikes who have been excluded from certain amounts of our active transport network because of layout designs and what have you. And if we actually think sensibly in a joined up way around these things, it improves life for everyone. Thank you. Sorry for overrunning a little bit.
Only very slightly, Melanie. Thank you very much indeed. Next, the same question to Simon Lepori. Simon.
Yeah, I reiterate, active travel is incredibly important, and I think we have seen it this year. It's how we make it continue. So an integrated transport system, proper cycleways, good quality footpaths and paths in general, and making sure our parks are welcoming. I do want to talk about what kind of future we're going to see, because everyone is under the assumption we're all just going to go back to how it was. I know that I've worked from home a lot, and I know some of my former colleagues have worked from home a lot. I know a lot of my friends have worked from home a lot and been much more productive. And this has been noted by companies. And companies that for many years were saying, you can't work from home, we can't accommodate it, we can't do it, are now turning around and there's no excuse because they've done it for the past year. So thinking we're all going to be back in the city centre is something that I think is a fallacy. I think the way we're going to live and work and travel is going to be incredibly different. We are going to be living in more 15-minute communities where you just want to go to the shop because you're working at home. So we don't have to go into a city centre or round the M60. And I think, when we look at active travel, how our councils and our city region can facilitate it to encourage people to just walk round the corner with an umbrella if it's raining, like most of us do already, is something that we are going to have to think about, and we do have to encourage moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Simon. Now, the same question to Stephen Morris. How important is active travel as part of the transport offering in Greater Manchester?
Well, I think everybody agrees that active transport is really required, and especially in Manchester, but I'm actually running for Greater Manchester Mayor. So I have to take into consideration all the Oldham, Rochdales, Wigans, Boltons, all the hills, all the dips that people have to look at, and to look at what public transport's available for them. Some people may be able to travel a cycle on a flat road in Holland, may be suitable, but it's not suitable when you're cycling a couple of miles up a hill in Oldham, completely different. And as Mayor of Greater Manchester, I have to look at the whole of Greater Manchester, and that's what I will do. So Central Manchester, yes, it will be a case of trying to promote active travel, either walking, cycling, get people on to public transport. But then when you go to the outskirts of Manchester, to the other areas that the Greater Manchester Mayor looks after, you've got to look at, is cycling a viable option for people, or do they need the bus services? And that's where we need to look at the areas as an individual area to say, okay, in Oldham, buses, Rochdale, buses, Manchester, active cycling. We're supposed to be standing as for mayors of Greater Manchester, yet all we hear is options that are really only suitable for Central Manchester to get rid of the congestion in Central Manchester. So as Greater Manchester Mayor, I look at all the 10 boroughs, what is suitable for all the 10 boroughs, what is individual to them, and what is needed. And that's what we need to do. And if Cycling's not suitable when you're cycling off Saddleworth Moors, off Diggle, Delft, any of them. Then we need to provide the bus services for them. So we have to look at Greater Manchester, not just be blinkered on Central Manchester.
Stephen, thank you very much indeed. And finally, the same question to Nick Buckley. Nick.
Thank you. What I'm hearing is you will walk, you will cycle. I don't want to hear that. I want to have a conversation with the residents of Greater Manchester saying, how do you see your life? How do you want to travel? I don't want to hear you're not using your car again. Get on that bus. This isn't the way we should run this region. We're public servants. If any of us, well, one of us will become the elected mayor. We're public servants. Let's have that conversation with people and let's deliver what they want us to deliver. And there will be problems, but we've got technology and we can overcome those problems. But at the moment with this debate, it's all about what we're going to do to the people of Greater Manchester. And we need to move away from that. And we need to realise we're public servants and we need to deliver an infrastructure that they want and that they're willing to use. And there should be options, cycle lanes, you know, we promote things for health, but that's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing this is what we're going to do to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick, and thank you to all the candidates. And just a reminder to you all, if like Nick there, you have said all you want to say on the question before your 2 minutes is up, then that's absolutely fine, and that will obviously allow us to get more questions in. So do let me know if you finished before the 2 minutes is up, and we'll move on to the next candidate. Right, the third question comes from Jill Lovesey. Thank you very much for your question, Jill. Jill asks, how can the Mayor's powers best be used to achieve major reductions in air pollution? How can the Mayor's powers best be used to achieve major reductions in air pollution? And we're going to ask that question first to Peter Clifford. Peter.
Okay, thank you. I think we do need to look at how we reduce pollution, but what I want to say from the outset is how much I oppose the measures that put a burden on working people, and in particular, how the clean air moves in Greater Manchester target taxi drivers, self-employed van drivers, and so on and so forth. The paper that I promote, the Militant paper, carried an article supporting the protest by taxi drivers last August, a cavalcade of hundreds of taxi drivers facing devastating conditions. I know I talked to the cabbies of Piccadilly. They take about £30 a day right now, if they're lucky. £30 a day for 10 hours work. Work that out. They're doing £3 an hour. That's what they're on. They've taken an incredible hit, but I don't think they should take the hit for air pollution at all, because I think the question of the environment, the threat to the environment, comes out of capitalism and its profit system. It's not a common question that we're all responsible for. It's a class question. And the root of the problem lies in the drive for profits. And the answer to that lies in our own struggles to overcome that. Just take another example in the transport industry. EasyJet, one of the biggest airlines in the UK, of course, has emissions. But you know what? They claim they've got zero emissions. How do they manage that? Because with millions of pounds, they buy offsets on it. They cover up the reality that they're responsible for these things. The car manufacturers hike the prices of cars that would be less polluting and so forth. I think the problem shouldn't be pushed onto working people, but onto the class that is responsible for pollution and so on.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much indeed. Next, the same question to Michael Elston. Michael.
I'm in favour of innovation, so that if we provide alternatives that are cheaper, more effective, more practical, more enjoyable, then people will adopt them. In terms of the clean air zone, if it turns out to be a way of financially exploiting people, well, I'm against exploiting anyone. At the moment, businesses are really struggling. It will be very damaging for many of them. And I think with any new idea, we have to think what the consequences of it are going to be, because it will potentially have two consequences. Well, at the forefront of our mind, we need to think, well, what's the aim? The aim is to get clean air, which we all want. So many people will pay it. Well, if they're paying it, that's not going to improve our air quality. I'm aware that some government funding may be available, and it may encourage the move towards cleaner vehicles. Well, if we're encouraging the move towards cleaner vehicles, of course, that's probably what we want. But if we're incentivizing people towards moving to cleaner vehicles, at that point, what's the need for the clean air zone? Because the remainder who can't afford to buy clean vehicles are going to still be paying the charge. So for them, it doesn't actually create clean air. So I would be in favour of the incentivization, but not the exploitation of motorists.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Now, Melanie Horrocks, you're next. How can the Mayor's powers best be used to achieve major reductions in air pollution? Melanie.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Jill, for the question. I think it comes back to some of the issues that I've already touched on, which is actually taking the lesson learned in Croatia and building on that. So to build up the fact that we incentivise alternatives and we disincentivise the use of cars and private vehicles. And I think it's a strange suggestion that implication has been taken, that I would be insisting that everyone has a bike and only uses that from now on. That's quite simply ludicrous and not something that I've said, and certainly nothing I've heard this evening. It's about looking at what changes can be made and how can the Mayor support those changes with the powers that they have. And the clear answer lies in transport and enabling the transport network to work. It was really interesting to hear that Michael picked up on the point that I'd made, which was the fact that, there's no point leaving someone stranded when they've got off a bus somewhere near the tram station. They need to link up and join up. We need to have buses and bus corridors that run through, so that actually it's not a case of, oh, well, the bus, let's open up the bus lane after it's gone through. It's so people think, I won't get in my car because it's cheaper than paying for the parking that Peter's mentioned. And it's quicker than it is to go in my car, to go in that bus and go in that bus lane. And there's plenty of buses that go up and down the hills in Diggle and in Rochdale and all over the outskirts of the region where there are hills. That it's just simply not acceptable to say, oh, well, that wouldn't work there. Buses do work there. They just need to work better and in a more efficient way to enable the citizens of those parts of the region to utilise them better. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Now, the same question to Simon Lepori. Simon.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat things that have already been said, because I pretty much agree with a lot of what's already been said. We need to make public transport cleaner, safer, more accessible to everyone to use. There is going to be a place for cars on our roads. We need to incentivise cleaner cars, electric cars. We need to incentivise cycling through active travel. How do we tackle the air pollution issue? Hopefully, with all of these measures, we will bring air pollution down. There are other things, such as our waste management structure in Greater Manchester, such as our industry across Greater Manchester, encouraging them. But the congestion charge, and my party's got a history with referendums, we did have a vote on a congestion charge like London. This is not a congestion charge like that. This is imposed by the Conservative government in London to reduce air pollution. They are charging small businesses and they are putting our business locally in jeopardy through it. Do I support the congestion charge? In its current form, no. How they could have done it was they could have incentivized business to green their fleets and actually given them green tax breaks to actually convert their vehicles to zero polluting vehicles. However, the business are going to have this congestion charge imposed on them, and we need to make sure that they are equipped to deal with that financially, so it doesn't have the hits that we are talking about and other people have already mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Next, Stephen Morris, how can the Mayor's powers best be used to achieve major reductions in air pollution? Stephen.
Yeah, well, we have to look at other forms, because at the moment it all seems to be about public transport and cars, which a lot of us tend to be in the same kind of area, which is to get people on public transport, try and encourage people out of cars, not impose it on them. When you look at London and other areas, what's the biggest pollution? London's had congestion charge for years, but it's still a very polluted area. What is one of the biggest pollutants? Well, actually, it's wood-burning stoves. They're one of the biggest 8%, generate 8% of small 8% of small particulates, but triple what a car would do, triple the congestion of traffic. So we have to look at the entire issue on pollution as a whole. It's not just a car and public transport issue. It's not in London. It's not been that for a while. I was in London a couple of years ago when I first heard it on the radio about the issues of wood burning stoves causing problems. And the pollutant is still there. The congestion charge is still there. The cars are still there. We have to think differently. We have to look at getting people out, encouraging them into the cars, into green public transport, but not tax them. Businesses cannot afford any more taxes. People are not going to be getting pay rises. A lot of people are looking to keep the jobs nowadays. There is a new way of working, and people will be struggling going forward. We know there's a lot of redundancies coming. I've already dealt with a lot of people being made redundant for the trade union work. So we have to look differently. We cannot just pick something from London and say that will work. We cannot just look at buses or cars. We have to look at the pollution, what's generating the pollution as a whole. And things like wood burning stoves. Nobody's mentioned that, and that is a big pollutant. Let's address it.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Next, the same question to Nick Buckley. Nick.
Thank you. Following on from the last points, let me give you a little example, a story, nothing to do with pollution. So 20 years ago, I've got a background in reducing antisocial behaviour. And 20 years ago in East Manchester, we had a bus stop with a bench that old ladies used to sit on waiting for the bus. And in the evenings, kids would come round with alcohol, sit on the bench and cause problems. And the initial response of the police and the council was, right, let's get the bench removed. And I had to say, wait a minute, that bench is a community resource for people waiting for the bus. The bench isn't the problem. It's the antisocial behaviour that's the problem. And that's what we need to look at here. If we're looking at clean air and we're looking at that, let's look at what the pollutants are. The car and the vehicles are not the problem. It's the pollution that's the problem. So let's tackle the pollution. Let's look at the wood burning stoves. Let's look at how we can clean these vehicles up. We've got technology developing all the time. It isn't about cars bad. It's let's have clean air, but let's see how we're going to get there. And let's speak to the experts. Let's have some comprehensive plan. But it just seems to be all the time, cars bad. And we need to move away from that.
Thank you very much, Nick. And finally, Andy Burnham, how can the Mayor's powers best be used to achieve major reductions in air pollution?
Well, thanks for the question. I am using the Mayor's powers to put more electric buses on our roads, and people may see those around the city region, green buses that we can see and the city centre bus. And I will use the powers to bring buses under public control. Because that will allow us to have a cleaner, greener fleet. And I'm going to respond to what Nick was saying. I'm not against the car, but actually, if more people are on public transport, the roads will work better for drivers. And we haven't got the right mix at the moment. We've got too many people in cars, not enough people on public transport. So the place isn't working. I would use the powers to extend the tram, as I have done. And the tram is renewable energy it runs on and is zero emissions. So these are the things that I'm already doing, including building the country's largest cycling and walking network. But just to clear something up, Andrew, we've heard mention of it again tonight, the suggestion that there is a congestion charge being brought in. I will never introduce a congestion charge as mayor. I've been absolutely clear about that, and I respect the vote of 10 years ago. Clean air zone is not a congestion charge. And people, I think, are playing politics by suggesting that it is. A congestion charge is a charge to use the roads. A clean air zone is an incentive to try and ask people to move to a clean vehicle. And once they have moved, there is no charge. And let's be absolutely clear about this. Our 10 councils are under a legal instruction from the government to introduce measures, including a clean air zone, because there is illegal polluted air in all 10 of our boroughs. So the question, we've not got a choice of whether we can do it. Stephen's wrong about that. We have to do it. The question is how we do it. And I will ensure that those taxi drivers that Peter are talking about are protected, that they get financial support to shift their vehicles. And actually, through the clean air zone, we restrict out of town working, which is undercutting our taxi drivers at the moment. If we help them shift to a cleaner vehicle, it can be cheaper to run. It can make their business more sustainable. So it's how we do it. We don't actually have a choice over whether we do it. We're being instructed to do it. We will do it fairly.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, candidates, for your answers to that question. Now let's move on to our fourth question of the night, and this is from George J. Thank you for your question, George. We know different areas of Greater Manchester have differing levels of access to different forms of transport. Would the candidates agree with me that areas that don't have train and tram services should be first prioritised for funding in the subsidised bus network, as this currently isn't taken into account? So that question goes first of all to Michael Elston. Michael.
Well, yeah, there certainly are areas of Greater Manchester that are provided for less than others. Bolton and Wigan come to mind. I was in Lee not that long ago, and I had a massive walk from the station to where I was going. The buses didn't go anywhere near it. So yes, whatever scheme we do introduce, those areas that don't presently have Metrolink available to them certainly should be first in line for improved bus services.
Okay. Thank you very much, Michael. Next, Melanie Horrocks. Melanie.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you, George, for the question. I think sort of where I've been talking about, or that already sort of goes some way to answering this question. And that's because that's to say we can't have an integrated and joined up and sensible system that works across the entire city region if parts of the city region aren't accessible by public transport. So I think that is a sort of, my answer provides to other questions, provides an insight into where I'm going to go here. And that's because we need to encourage everyone to be able to access public transport, access active travel, have options for walking and cycling. And if there is areas where that isn't possible because they are underserved by infrastructure or by routes or by anything else, then that is going to be an immediate barrier to entry into those sorts of types of travel, and that would have to be looked at. So yes, absolutely, that is something that would be a key point because the entire city region needs to work and be accessible by everyone. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Next, Simon Lepori, and the reminder of the question: should money from the subsidised bus network be concentrated as a first priority on those parts of Greater Manchester that don't currently have tram and train connections? Simon.
Yes. I think we're all in agreement. Yes, buses need to go everywhere, and we need to get people onto buses and have a route that's closer to home so they can walk within 15 minutes to the bus stop. But it is about the whole network, and it is about the whole of Greater Manchester. I'm an advocate of linking the end of the Rochdale line through Bury, through Southern Bolton and into Wigan, and then looping it around and linking it with Eccles, because why should you have to come into the city centre to go out? I'm also in favour of using the navigation road to Stockport train line, maybe turning it into a train tram and putting some more stops on there to actually get people in places like Cheadle and Gatley and through Southern Wythenshawe into trams and trains, so they don't feel the need to drive. but they can if they want to. There's also the element of park and ride schemes. You know, if you are going to drive, why should you drive for 5 miles when you can drive for 1.5 miles, park, and then go in on public transport? So it's all about connectivity, integrating, and making a system that works for the entirety of Greater Manchester. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Simon. Next, Stephen Morris. Stephen.
Yeah, as mentioned before, I was concentrating on being the Mayor of Greater Manchester, and therefore I was already looking at the outer councils and not just concentrating on the centre of Manchester. We do need to increase the bus services in all the outer boroughs. We need to make sure that they do have a priority. The other candidate mentioned about a circular for the trams. People who've worked on the trams like myself, we were saying that for years. I started on the trams when they were just opening the Eccles line, and we were saying for years you needed a circular. Why was people travelling from Bury to Manchester to go out to Altrincham, and now Bury to Manchester to go out to Rochdale? You need a circular. You need a spider's web approach to it. And when you take people from going from Bury to Manchester to go to Altrincham, and they can get the circular, you then release spare capacity for the people to go from Bury to Manchester. So there was a bigger scope there. And that is something that people who's worked on the trams have said for years. It's nothing new. It's just we haven't had people in the powers that be that had that vision and that thought to get it put forward. You know, like I say, I worked on the trams 15 years, so I've been there, done that, and I know what needs to be done. And we need to encourage people in the outer boroughs to try and get onto public transport, but they are severely neglected. How many people in Wigan or the outer areas of Oldham and Rochdale actually have a link with Manchester? All they'll be hearing is everything to do with Manchester. We have to engage with the people on the outer boroughs, make sure they can use the buses, get them involved, put the services there. And actually, as a mayor, we should be out there speaking to them, not stuck in centre of Manchester. With the Mayor of Greater Manchester, let's get out to them areas and speak to them and understand exactly what is happening.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Next is Nick Buckley. Nick, should that subsidised bus funding be prioritised in areas that don't currently have tram and train links?
If you unpick this question, it really is a bag of vipers, because who's going to say no? And who's going to define where those priority areas are? Because believe me, 9 out of 10 people in Greater Manchester will say, my area is a priority for better transport links and a better bus network. Everywhere cannot be a priority. You know, this will take time. This will take, a generation to do this across Greater Manchester. So what we need to do, to be fair, is we need to develop a formula about who's getting what first and why. And that needs to be open and transparent. And people will complain about it, and we won't be able to give everybody what they want, the first couple of stages, and we're going to upset people, but some people will be happy. That's the way this goes. And the only way to make those choices is to be open and honest.
Thank you very much, Nick. Next, Andy Burnham. Andy.
Well, it's not a nest of vipers or whatever Nick said, because we're doing it. We are prioritising it. Wigan and Bolton, as I think Michael correctly said, have the poorest public transport offer at the moment. So they will be the first to benefit from franchise services. So the plan I've developed will see franchise services introduced on the ground in early 2023 in Wigan and Bolton. It's a principle we've established. So the Lee area, the Lee constituency, actually is recognised as being the biggest area in the country without a train station. It's why we built the Lee guided busway, to compensate for that. It's why I've signed off funding recently for a new train station at Golborne, which will be the first new build train station in Greater Manchester for 20 years. It's why we're developing a business case to bring the Metrolink to Middleton, to Stockport and to Bolton to better serve those areas. And colleagues have made the right point about circular routes, circular links on trams. Two things to say about that, and it's a correct point. A reformed bus system where we tell the bus companies where they must go allows us to deliver those orbital links. At the moment, buses are competing with tram, as Michael said before. They don't deliver people to the door of Metrolink because they're trying to compete with it. So we can make them do those orbital links when we control the system. But long term, we want to take control of the rail system. So we integrate it with Metrolink and we have tram train, and then we'll have those orbital links of the kind that Stephen mentioned. I was going to make one final point, Andrew, which is something that no one else has mentioned. It's not geographical unfairness. It's about accessibility for disabled people, a point I made at the start. I hope all candidates would join me in saying it's fundamentally wrong that 52% of train stations in Greater Manchester under Network Rail's control are inaccessible to people using wheelchairs. I think if all candidates in this mayoral race send a message to Network Rail, we will not have that. They must change that within the next couple of years, or hand over those stations to Greater Manchester so that we can change it and open up our rail stations to all of our citizens.
Thank you very much, Andy. And finally on this question, Peter Clifford. Peter.
To start where Andy finished on disability, here's the challenge, Andy. Why have you done nothing about the fact that the Go Ahead Northwest is running strike-breaking coaches without disability access? And you know that full well that that is going on. Why have you done nothing about that? You just gave some examples of how much you were going to do such stuff about disability, and yet this is going on right underneath your eyes. See, I think the challenge on transport is that it's not a thing that can be improved or made better. It's a commodity under capitalism. It's an item that money is made out of by a small number of people who compete with each other. They compete between different bus companies, different trains companies, buses, trains, and all other forms of transport. It doesn't begin with social need, but it's subordinated to the profit system. And so long as that goes on, we will continue, we won't be able to get what we want. That's why I begin with the fight of the unions, because I think it's through the unions that we could fight for a massive, massive program of public works to build the transport system that's needed, because it's chaos. I'm a rail worker at Piccadilly. The Ordsall Link was built to improve connectivity between Victoria and Piccadilly. But then there's enormous congestion. Why? Because they don't build the platforms to deal with the increased load. Why don't they build the platforms? Because they say they don't have the money. But the wealth is out there. It just goes to the wrong class. That's why the fight through the unions. And again, Andy, I don't hear you yet on Queen's Road. Where do you stand on the strike? I think in this meeting tonight, you should say where you stand on that.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much. And we'll give Andy a chance to address that in his closing remarks. But we have got time for one more question. I am going to ask you to be brief on this, candidates, because we are running out of time. This one comes from Harry Bond. And Harry asks, what are your plans for expanding and improving Metrolink? And I'll ask you for just one thing. What one thing will you do to expand and improve the Metrolink? My question goes first to Melanie Horrocks.
Hi, thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Harry, for that question. The key thing is to make it actually more usable, and that, to my mind, is to allow us to take all of our bicycles on there, to allow us to expand active travel and active participation in use of trams, to include those who want to cycle on and cycle off at the other end. A second one would be to actually anticipate what the needs are with regards to the tram. It's not acceptable to not be able to get on 4 trams that turn up to get you home from the city centre because there happens to be a football match on and the trams are packed, and then they're just doubles, they're not longer trams, and they're not coming more frequently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Next, Simon Napori, what one thing would you do to improve and expand the tram network?
So I'm a fan of that Northern Link, but not just into Bolton, moving it into Wigan and looping it round into Eccles, and just creating that fully orbital Metrolink, so people don't have to come in. Don't have to come in to the city centre in order to go out. Sorry. That was just wrong. I do apologise. Don't have to come in so they can go back out. And that's where we should be. And I think we're all in agreement with that. And I'm aware of the bids for the Middleton line and into Bolton. And I fully support that. And I would follow that through as well.
No problem, Simon. Objects appearing in front of the screen, all part of the joy of Zoom meetings. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, the same question to Stephen Morris.
what we go to what Melanie said about bikes, and I go back to when I worked for Metrolink. I was one of the people consulted for Metrolink with some others on when they were about to purchase the new yellow trams, and there was ourselves and disability groups, and we mentioned about bikes. To go back to how long we've had these yellow trams now, we mentioned about bikes going on, and the local authorities, the transport authorities, completely ignored us on that. We raised issues to do with disability access with the scooters, the large scooters at the time, ignored us on that. So the issues of bikes or going on trams has been there even before the yellow trams was ordered. We raised them, and we need somebody who's got the vision to say, well, we need to do this, not just folded bikes. We need to do this. We need to take them, be allowed to get on and off the trams, right? So why didn't they do it at the time? Because they don't have the vision. It's stuck. You've got to look at who's been running these authorities for so long in Greater Manchester. Okay, they've been Labour controlled for so long that they've lost the vision of what is needed. And anybody who comes with any kind of new idea about putting bikes on trams or anything else, it's just ignored. And that was a big issue for me at the time, because we wanted to help cyclists, because I did cycle at the time into work. So we need a vision of getting these things moving and getting people on the trams. Okay. And
okay.
So
thank you very much indeed, Stephen. Nick Buckley, you're next. Nick.
For me and for the people I speak to about the tram system, it's personal safety. It's about community safety. You know, people are tired of bricks going through tram windows, aggressive beggars, people drinking on the trams. If we want to have a public transport system and a trans system that attracts people onto it and more people use it, we need to police it better. And that's my number one idea for the tram system, better community safety.
Thank you very much indeed. Nick, next is Andy Burnham. What one thing would you do to improve and expand the metro system?
Well, I did do what Nick said. I put 60 extra police officers into our travel safe unit, and they do work on our trams now. But to list some other things, I've overseen the expansion of Metrolink to Trafford Centre through Trafford Park and past Old Trafford. That will increase usage of it because it's where many people want to go. That was done on time and ahead of time, actually, and on budget. I've ordered 27 new trams to ease overcrowding, and they're being delivered now. We've taken delivery of the first few. I've introduced zonal fares, and I've actually introduced a range of innovative fare options for people who travel earlier can travel cheaper, so that we then spread the congestion on the trams throughout the day. I've introduced a clipper system, so people can have, rather than just a weekly or a monthly, they can have journeys when they want to take them. Contactless, I oversaw the introduction of that. I think the big thing is if we integrate trams with buses under public control, people will get even more for their money because they will be able to take single journeys that involve bus and tram. So I would argue I've overseen quite a big improvement on the Metrolink system, an expansion of it, better fare options for people, and it runs well, and it's a good system, and I'm very, very proud of it. It's one of the biggest light rail systems in Europe, and it performs in the top 5 light rail systems in Europe. I think we all should be very, very proud of it, but we can make it even better when it is integrated with our buses, and that's what we're going to do.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. And next, Peter Clifford. Peter.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges on the Metrolink that hasn't been touched on is the substantial number of people who work for it, who are working for contractors and agencies, who are on contracts that with very little job stability, who are on minimum wage or very close to that. And I think it's a big challenge for facing the unions, that the unions need to organize these workers, because the expansion of the layer of these workers is used by the employers to attack other workers' conditions, people who work directly for the companies. I know at Piccadilly Station, for example, on Sunday, a dozen workers finished work on Sunday. They were laid off. They had just a text 4 days before. They were laid off indirectly by a publicly owned company, Network Rail, that uses contractors and agency workers. That's what's going on across the transport industry. So I think it's a big challenge for the unions to organise these workers. And I think it's part of the fight ahead of us. And I think it's changing those of us who are in the unions and fight through the unions, seeing our view of the unions, not as just being narrowly around wages and jobs, but seeing that it is the force and based on the class, working people who don't have any interest in the profit system, but have an interest in organising against it. And in the course of that, we can organise a transport system that's safer, that goes where it needs to go, and begins with social need, not the profit system.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. And thank you to everyone for your answers. Thank you to the candidates, and thank you to you for your questions. We've got through as many as we can in the hour and a half or so that we've had, and some great questions from the audience tonight. So thank you very much indeed for your participation. We've now come to the final section of the night, which is the closing statements from the candidates. Candidates, you have 1 minute to say anything you feel you've not managed to cover, just 1 minute this time. And this will be your final pitch to the voters in the virtual room tonight on your thoughts on transport in Greater Manchester. And we'll go in the same order as that with which we started. So first of all, we're going to go to Nick. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you. The role of Mayor is to improve the quality of life of residents today and plan for a better Greater Manchester tomorrow. We must never forget that the Mayor works for us, the people. They're a public servant. The people must have a real say in the future of their city. Hardly anyone has heard of the Clean Air Zone scheme. The public consultation has come and gone. This is not a real consultation. This is box ticking. The Mayor this evening has said, we have to do this. Westminster have told us we have to do it. This is Greater Manchester. We don't have to do anything we don't want to do. We need to design the future of public transport together, the public and the government. We need to fix our transport problems, not fix the people so the problem disappears. My transport team will serve the people, their needs now and into the future. A modern transport system for a modern Greater Manchester. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. And next is Andy Burnham. Andy.
Just quickly to answer Peter's question, I have met with Unite, Peter. I actually said to the company I didn't think it was acceptable that they should be using fire and rehire, as you said. We brought the two parties back to the table, and they're currently at ACAS. I have been planning to go down to visit the workers, so yes, they have my support, and I'm happy to make that clear. And actually, when we franchise the buses, we will link it to the good employment charter in Greater Manchester. I've been clear, we will not see franchising introduced on the back of people's terms and conditions. I'll finish, Andrew, by saying I've heard candidates tonight, other candidates say we don't want what London has got. Well, £1.55 per single bus journey. I tell you, I want that for the people of Greater Manchester. A daily cap on what people can spend any given day. I want that for the people of Greater Manchester. Cheaper travel for our young people. I definitely want that. That's why I introduced free bus travel for our 16 to 18-year-olds. I want those things for the people of Greater Manchester. That is what levelling up means to me. And I will be a mayor to give you a strong voice to get those things, a better public transport system, the kind of system London has had for years. We're going to get it for Greater Manchester in the next decade. Thank you very much.
Andy, thank you very much indeed. Next, Peter Clifford. Peter.
Yeah, I think in elections, most people try and weigh up who should I place my trust with, which is the lesser evil of the candidates. What I'm raising in this is to try and look on politics in quite a different way. Don't look on politics as the variety of promises that you've heard, most likely will get disappointed over in the years to come when they're not acted on. Look on politics as being a struggle. Look on politics as being what you do, not what you hope somebody will do on your behalf. See yourself as centre stage, not a politician claiming to do this or that. What I put forward is the need to act on the recognition that capitalism has got no answers except to keep on attacking working people. And that's what government after government, I believe, will continue to do. I think there is something we can do. And that's why I stand with the Queen's Road strikers. That's why I go to work 12-hour shifts, but I've made it to the picket line. And anyone else who's listening to this, I encourage them to do that. Go along on Saturday, Peter, when they have a rally and join that fight.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Time's up, I'm afraid. Thank you very much indeed, Peter. Next, Michael Elston. And Michael, I owe you an apology because entirely my fault, but I didn't ask you for an answer to that last question about what one thing you would do to improve and expand the Metrolink system. So what we're going to do, Michael, is give you an extra 2 minutes so that you can answer that question as well as give us your closing statement. So you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Well, firstly, I absolutely agree with Andy that our train stations should be made accessible to people with disabilities. But to go beyond that, our bus stations and bus stops should also be accessible to people with disabilities. And that means making pavements safer, having shelter, raising curbs for wheelchairs to use ramps. And they're not, and that's the responsibility of Transport for Greater Manchester. They should have done that already and haven't. So why under the franchise scheme do we think that anything is going to improve? Quickly, regarding Metrolink, I want to build stations in the heart of residential developments and of student accommodation to make it safe, accessible, to surround them with amenities, again, for them to be accessible for people with disabilities. In terms of the franchising scheme, I absolutely want to introduce a fully integrated system of public transport, but not at a cost of 135 million, an extra 84 million for depots, the provision of green and hydrogen buses, which is not provided for. How much is that going to cost? It's going to be a massive increase in council tax. Ticket fares are probably going to increase. If there is a flat fare, does that mean that people who make shorter journeys are going to be penalised? If there's no provision for extra routes, are there going to be any additional routes? If bus routes run alongside Metrolink routes, are they going to be removed because not everyone lives within walking distance of a Metrolink station? This is, I mean, you know, we had the mayor imposed on us for the purpose of improving our system of public transport. It hasn't been done, and now with an election looming, we've had this announcement, but this is an announcement not to address any of the issues that we're faced with, but rather to win an election.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. Next, closing comments, please, from Melanie Horrocks. Melanie.
Thanks, Andrew. There's only one person at the Hustings who can actually talk with any sort of authority about what they have done, and that's because there's only one person in the entire country who's ever been the Mayor of Greater Manchester, and that's Andy. So all of us are somewhat on the back foot because we don't have 4 years that we can draw on to say what we have done. We can only say what our hopes are, what our aims are, and what our options and plans are. And so that always makes me feel like we're somewhat on the back foot because we don't have 4 years to build on. What I have got and what I can bring forward is the successes and the importance of the actions taken by our local councillors in Greater Manchester and how they have made sure that in every place where they are elected, the climate emergency isn't just a motion that's been passed, but it is something that is actively pushed to the front of every decision that's made in those areas. We talk about the importance of a green in the room. Voting green in the mayoral elections puts a green in every room. It makes sure the climate emergency is front and centre, and I am the only candidate who can say that with the backing of a full party. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Next, Simon Lepori. Simon.
Thanks so much. So in my opinion, Greater Manchester is the best place to live and work and meet people and grow old. We need to make it even greater. And having active travel, an integrated transport system that's clean, safe and accessible for all should be a priority for any mayor of Greater Manchester. We want to clean the air. We want to make people healthier. We want to get them out of their cars, walking, cycling, using buses, using trams? Absolutely. We want a single ticketing system. Of course we do. Yes, it's London style in inverted commas, but we can make it Greater Manchester style, and we can make it our own, and we can do it better than Greater London has. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. And now Stephen Morris. Stephen.
Yeah, we've heard many about the Greater London and Greater Manchester combination. One of the things is with the buses, it's quite clear. I've said this since the last mayoral election. I want a daily cap, weekly cap, same as what Andy's saying. But the issue is we don't want different wages and different terms and conditions, which also come with what's going on in London. We don't want drivers in the same depot doing different routes on different contracts and different wages. We want them to have a living wage. I promote a Greater Manchester living wage and a standard wage for bus drivers across all depots and all routes. The issue is we need to make it a Greater Manchester style. We take the best from all the other areas that we look at and reject the bad. And the bad with London is the fact that employees, the bus drivers, are being, the wages are being driven down. And we have to make sure they have a living wage and it is capped and we can work with them.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Stephen. So that closes the closing remarks and all the comments from the candidates tonight. And that's all we've got for you. Thank you very much indeed to all the candidates for attending, for taking part in the debate this evening. A fantastic discussion on a really important topic. We're just sorry that we weren't able to welcome you to the University of Salford to hold this debate face to face and to actually get there on some of the forms of public transport and transport that we've been discussing. But it has been a really good discussion, and I'd like to thank you all, members of the audience, for your questions and for your participation. Thanks very much for joining us virtually for this hustings. Thank you for submitting your questions. Hopefully you found it useful. It's given you a better understanding of some of the issues around the mayoral election and given you a chance to hear from the candidates. We've been delighted to host these hustings, and I'd like to thank again Harry for her opening remarks on the work of the Healthy Active Cities Research Group. And if you'd like to find out more about Harry and the team's work, you can find them on Twitter at ActiveCitiesUOS. Don't forget, you can share your reaction to what you've heard tonight from the candidates using the hashtag GMTransportHustings. And a recording of this event will be available at the university's YouTube channel, should you wish to watch it again or share it online. But thank you once again to the candidates. Thank you to you for watching and for your questions. Thanks very much indeed. Good night.